So we'll start, and there's a lot of you here today. Holy shit! I didn't expect this to be popular, but right. Raid leading. This is gonna be the first part. This is just gonna be an introduction to what raid leading is, the basics. We're not actually gonna be raiding today, although after this introductory lecture, this will be put out as a Twitch VOD and a YouTube video for you guys to refer to later on. But after this, we'll be doing raids. We'll on PCNA, but that doesn't mean just because you're from console, PlayStation, Xbox, doesn't mean you can't attend those raids either, just to listen in or whatever. And even for this class right here, it doesn't really matter what platform or server you're on. Because raid leading is not. It's more about. It's more human than anything. It's not purely just about the content. Although we will place an emphasis on the content as well. So yeah, how many are there? Like, there's 30 people in here, more than 30 people. So you guys are obviously interested in raid leading, or at least curious to know what raid leading is like. So we're gonna be going over it. Does anyone have any questions before we start? Any concerns? Okay. So raid leading. Why raid lead? So I'm just curious. Like, anyone here, why do you want to raid lead? Is there a reason, or are you just like kind of thinking about it?
For me, it's not about learning to raid lead.
Okay.
It's understanding how to convey what I want people to do without sounding like a douchebag, because I was born with angry voice syndrome. And
angry voice.
When I raid lead, I'm pretty strict. Like, it's a military operation, and so I get very frustrated when people don't follow simple instructions, and that causes, I once turned around and asked someone to take the group to take a break, and it went like this: please take 5 minutes to evaluate your life choices. Go get a drink.
I remember that. I am loving it.
So that's the human part that he was talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
It's more about not upsetting people, because like when I don't consider human emotion when it is. It's like there's a right way. There's things that you need to be doing, and then if you're not doing them, I'm not like one of these. I'm going to pat you on the back and tell you it's going to be okay. I'm just going to be like, this is what you're doing wrong.
Right.
Well, in my point of view, I think why I want to know how to lead a raid in question is to know exactly what to require from everyone. You know what I mean?
Right.
If they have to be in the squad, if you have to have certain equipment, certain weapons or skills that are necessary to help the group go through whichever type of kind of trial you're going into, or what kind of raid you're going to, and like we said, not sound to be like a tyrant or a douchebag. You know what I mean? And be very polite about it. Just have fun, I guess. Make sure everybody's having fun, but being on point and in tuned with what the goal is on that raid. I mean, that's basically it.
Right. Yeah. These are all very good points, and actually really valid points, because we're actually gonna be talking about all of this in this lecture. We'll be touching on interactions with your teammates, or even with other people outside your team. We'll be discussing requirements, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, stuff like that. And probably for people who will later watch this video, I don't want it to be construed as, oh, you have to do it this way. This will be more open. It's more about there's no. It's a very difficult topic, because there's sometimes no right or wrong way, which we'll also discuss too in regards to raid leading. But yeah, I asked you guys why you went on raid lead, and it seems like you guys are more interested in not sounding like an asshole or a toxic elitist, as like a common stereotype, or how you could best improve your groups, which is great. But yeah, no matter what your reasoning, whether it was such as Inigo. So there was a video I did a year ago, where I interviewed a few raid leads from some of the best PvE guilds, and they had a lot to say about where they came from and why they raid led. So Inigo, for example, he did started raid lead because his friends and him came from PvP. And back then you could sell the gold jewelry you got from trials to other people. And then after that was, like gotten rid of by the developers, they still stayed in PvE because they found that as a group, they really liked PvEing together. Karma, he eventually became the raid lead of what you guys are definitely familiar with, Hodor, one of the best PvE raid guilds in history for ESO. He basically stepped up because there was no one else around. And I'm willing to bet a lot of you guys, if you raid lead currently, also felt the same way, or nobody else really wanted to do it. And it's definitely it's definitely a task. It's a responsibility that no one wants to do, but someone has to do it, right? Someone in the room has to do it. And whether, like if you're nifty and it's like you just ended up somehow raid leading, it doesn't really matter where you come from and stuff like that. But what does matter is when you get there, what do you do? So does anyone want to guess as to what the hardest part about raid leading is before we get into the nitty gritty?
Getting 12 people on time.
Getting 12 people together on time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
15. If you're 15 grouping 15 minutes before, like at best, plan to start half an hour later than expected.
Yep.
All right. Anything else that may be hard?
I would guess that, like, knowing the jobs of all the different roles, because people quite often only play one role.
Right.
I mean, I only play healer, and I'm interested in raid leading because I kind of see it as one of the support roles, really. So I want to know how to convey things and just how to understand things, so I can support everyone else, so we can get the best performance we can.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, you guys are totally right. Consistency, showing up on time, getting the same 12 people together to be interested, to be on the same page, and then even after you get the same 12 people, then you have to think about, okay, how are we doing as a group? And then you also have a lot of trouble, I'm sure, as a lot of you also have experienced, filling for your group. I mean, life happens, shit happens, but also there's times when people leave your team for other teams, or they just kind of quit the game, and then you start having trouble filling up 2 to 3 spots in your core roster every once or twice every week, something like that, I'm sure. And of course, the second hardest part, in my opinion, is decisions, both in content and for the team. And this is in regards to, okay, well, who do I pick over another? What happens when things kind of go bad in terms of drama? But yeah, we'll be talking about this as well. And of course, we'll also be talking about the next part, which is how do you get started? Before we talk about what you should be doing as a raid lead and stuff like that, how do you get started? So it's a really important thing to recognize that raid leading is going to be relevant to who you're raid leading or what you're raid leading. There's no one model fits all for raid leading. So before you start a group, or before you go start looking for people, or even if you're with a group of friends, what's your goal as a group? You gotta ask yourself this all the time. Well, not all the time, but definitely before you start a group. What's your goal? Is it endgame? Is it progression? Is it endgame progression? And for those of you who don't know, endgame progression means basically score pushing. So everything will be decided by your goal. Are you going for a clear? Are you going for a score? Are you gonna try to improve a score? Are you gonna try to improve your runtime? Things like that. So I want you to keep that in mind, that there's no one model fits all. That won't happen. And that's why you often see when certain raid leads try to raid lead other groups, it just doesn't work. Because oftentimes it's either too intense for the group or too lax for the group, and so forth. So that you also have to keep in mind, there's always different personalities clashing in raids, and that's something you also have to keep in mind as a raid lead. But basically, looking for group, where do you find people in the first place to raid lead with, or just to form a group with? Now, a lot of people these days, when it also happens in this Discord server quite a bit. Someone asks, "Well, I can't find any group to raid with or whatever," and then the usual response is, "Well, there's Guild Finder now," and I'm just like, I kind of think that's kind of a lazy answer, but yeah, it's true. There is Guild Finder. It's a bit more easier to find guilds, sure, but it's harder to find the right guilds. There's no easy answer to this. Where you'll find people, whether it's zone chat, you know, whether it's a role-playing event in the Rift, whether it's guild finder, good people, good players can come from anywhere. So it doesn't matter what background they may have, whether they were PvE'er, PvE'er, role player. Some of the best players I've known, they didn't even start out PvE. But yeah, so consider that. But also another thing to really consider is Discord. And Discord has completely revolutionized, in my opinion, ESO's raiding scene and how people organize raids. I mean, before Discord was a big thing, it was usually, you know, TeamSpeak or Mumble or something like that, some weird, vague software nobody has heard about these days. And you didn't have servers like this. You didn't really have any communication across various platforms or servers, or even different groups on the same server and platform. You just didn't. I remember in a TeamSpeak, you know.
Nephis,
Yep.
your age is showing.
What? What's
Your age is showing.
Oh, it's whatever. But I remember, you hear things, whether it's from Facebook, YouTube, whatever, about another raid group or whatever, like Hodor. I remember hearing about Hodor, and I'm like, well, I don't give a shit about them because I've never met them or whatever. And then one day I did. I think someone's mic is open. Sorry. But anyway, one day, you know, I ended up talking to one of them, and it was in a TeamSpeak, and it was pretty cool. And then after Discord, you know, became more popular, like everyone started talking to each other. Everyone on the same server platform across different servers and platforms. And Discord, I really do encourage you to use as a tool to not just look for other people, but also to network. You can't just expect to be like, okay, I'm looking for 1100 people who's with me. You can do that, but sometimes some people you may want will be like, well, who the heck is this guy? Right? And if I suddenly got a DM from somebody in this Discord saying, hey, you want to join my raid team? My first question is, who are you? And then, you know, I'll ask around, okay, who is this guy? Should I join this raid team? So definitely start using Discord, not just as a tool to look for people, but also to connect with people. And just to show you guys, like, the importance of Discord now, like, as much as you guys, as much as I also meme ZeniMax Online Studios or whatever, Performance or whatever, they, as a multi-billion-dollar company, recently made a Discord for themselves. Why would a multi-billion-dollar company make a Discord server for themselves? Because it's simple. It's a really great way of networking. It's a really great way of connecting with people, and cannot just disregard this for raids. Just can't. And also the fact that it provides a free voice chat in comparison to other voice software like, you know, TeamSpeak, and is often more streamlined, like better than Skype. Pretty important to recognize. So yeah. So requirements. So somebody here was talking about requirements for your raid team. Again, this depends on the goal. I see a lot of, you know, Craglorn zone chat advertisements asking for like an achievement. Link your achievement, or link your dye color, or link your title, whatever. But it's a bit more complicated than that when you're looking for people for your group. But again, it depends on the goal. Are you going for a score? Are you gonna go for a clear progression? Is it the pug group you just want to kind of slap together in last minute? Again, just want to emphasize that. Vet trials. Now, a lot of people come to Discord and often ask the professors here, like, what is an acceptable amount of DPS? And you get varied answers from different professors. And that's because everyone has their own different experiences as to what endgame is, as to what an acceptable number is. But most people will agree that 60 to 70k DPS on raid dummies is more than fine for most content. Certainly, maybe not for, you know, Godslayer or something like that, something, you know, more hardcore. But in general, just to clarify a couple misconceptions, 60 to 70k DPS on raid dummies is fine. And a lot of people come here as well asking, well, what should my DPS be on a 3 mil or 6 mil? If you encounter someone like that, you should probably encourage them to test on a raid dummy if possible. If not, maybe the only result is taking them into a raid, but raid dummies is definitely preferable in terms of seeing a metrics for your DPS. For healers and tanks, the primary issue is going to be gear. It's harder to test healers and tanks because there's no raid dummy for a tank and a healer to parse on or to show that, oh, they're a good tank. You know, like I can stand there in front of a raid dummy on my tank and keep taunting him every 13 seconds, but that doesn't actually show anyone if I'm a good tank. So the first thing you want to do as a raid lead, check if they have the gear. If they don't have certain gear, again, this depends on your goal as a group. That's okay. I mean, maybe you can help them farm later or something like that, but they should have the basics. They should, you know, a tank should have Eben. A healer should have Olarime or something like that. If they don't have Somerset, yeah, sure, SPC in the worst case scenario. But otherwise, gear is first and foremost important more for supports. Testing, you're just going to have to take them to the raid. There's no easy way around this. A lot of people say, you know, you should be testing tanks in Dragonstar Arena or Blackroot's Prison. I mean, I guess you could. But I think that you would see a much more accurate representation of what they can do if they were actually in the raid. So oftentimes when groups, even endgame groups, try out people in the support role, they don't just ask you for achievements or titles or what you did. They'll ask some of that, but they'll actually say, okay, we can try you out in the next raid. And then you go, and depending on your performance, they will say, oh, you're in, or sorry, but we're going to look for somebody else. So that's it. Personalities. So something that stuck out to me when I was interviewing the raid leads last year. As a raid lead, what do you look for in a player? And one of the answers...
Nephis.
What? No,
that was just answering your question.
Oh, okay. One of the answers stuck out to me, and it was by Kush from Xbox NA. And he said, it tells a lot about somebody when they react when things go wrong. And I think everyone here can sort of agree with that. Sometimes it's not just about the numbers, sometimes it's just not about how good they are. Because when it comes down to it, it is a team effort. It's 12 people. If someone is not acting, how should I say this, you know, decently, there may be problems in the future, right? And that will lead to more problems down the road in terms of personality conflicts and drama, and none of us really have the time for that, usually, unless you want it. That's an entirely different story. But does anyone have any questions in regards to requirements or anything, sort of from a raid lead perspective?
Just
when
a couple comments.
Okay.
Sure.
Oh no, go ahead. Ask your questions first.
Okay, I was asked because a lot of people think we should not do more than, let's say, if we're doing a trial and it's everybody's being there for 2 hours and they're not getting anywhere. Is 2 hours enough, or long enough, or short enough?
That's a great question. It will vary by group, but from my personal experiences as a raid lead, and watching other raid leads and watching other groups, I would definitely say 2 hours is minimum. Like 1 hour is way too short.
You don't get any progression done in that time generally.
Yeah, as Slaming said, you don't. Really.
And how many times a week?
How many times a week is also a good question. Depends on the schedule too, like life, right? Some of us have kids, some of us have jobs, some of us, you know, just don't have the time, right? So that will also depend on the group, which again will directly correlate with your goal. So I think, for example, I think I was raiding 4 days a week with 40, but that's kind of extreme for a lot of people. So this will directly correlate with both your goal and your group. So if your group says, okay, 2 days a week is enough, that's fine. And I would also say, I think 2 days minimum a week is a minimum, like for a raid team. 2 days a week, that's fine. Depending on also what kind of, you know, group it is, 1 day a week as well is sometimes fine too. But you often see progression go up with more days. That answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions before we move on to the next slide?
So just a couple of comments on the when it comes to requirements. What's done good for me when I'm raid leading in terms of support and figuring out whether or not support is good is generally I'll either ask for a POV or take them into a raid, not necessarily the one that we're looking to progress, but something a little bit easier, just so I can get an idea of how the support plays, how they move, where they're casting. Are they good at their placement? Are they not good at their placement? Are they good at their up times? Are they not good at their up times? The fun part about that, and generally we'll do that with easier raids. We'll do that with a vet Cragmore non-hard mode, just because you can see how dedicated they are to that craft, especially with support. Support is so hard because you have to be so aware of what's going on. Are they aware of where they're placing their buffs like Olo and things like that? How do they move? How do they get around? So just when it comes to figuring out what's good for support, there's a lot of different methods you can use. But again, I think the best way, like Nefa said, is to see them, but you don't necessarily have to see them in the content you're looking to ask them to progress with you.
Right.
See how they work in the easy content, because honestly, the effort that they put into the easy content is going to correlate into the effort that they put into the hard content. And I've known plenty of healers and tanks that are sitting there with VSS and VAS clears, plus ones, even a couple that have plus twos. And when I get into a group with them, they're all over the place. And I realize that, you know what, as much as they have the clear and they have the title to their name, the rest of the support and the DPS probably pulled them through it. It's not something that they're going to be able to do with a group that's trying to progress. That's something that they got because they were with a group that's already progressed it and already knows how to handle deficiencies from other players. So,
yeah, these are all valid points, for sure.
I have a comment about the number of times that you raid per week.
Okay.
From my experience, something that's really important is if you've got somebody who's very analytical, like maybe someone who can interpret the logs really, really well and give quite structured advice for the next run, you can kind of get more out of running 2 times a week if you've got a group who's got somebody who's very good at giving advice to improve than you would get from running 4 times a week if you weren't really analyzing things and discussing how to move on.
Sorry, yeah, that's what I was gonna ask too. Is are we gonna cover like going over logs and everything?
Yeah, I'll be touching on logs as well.
Yeah, because I don't know.
You can touch me too,
where
but
to-
yeah.
what to do in logs.
So I'll be touching on logs, but I won't be showing you how to do it, because I was gonna actually refer you guys to a really well done video by Asian. I don't know if you guys know him. It's a video, like, basically tutorial on logs. So it'll show you guys where to do, how to filter it and stuff like that. I'll link it at the end of the lecture, if that will answer your question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question about what each class brings to a raid and what classes you want to bring based on which kind of raid you're doing.
That'll be covered in the future slide. you guys are awesome. You guys have the right questions, the best questions,
Okay.
and we'll be touching on all the topics that you guys have raised up. Really good. Anyone else have any question about the requirements, days a week, hours?
I would like to ask about the in-game communication while in raid, because most of the raids that I joined before and now, there is too much chatter and the important information is not being conveyed as serious as it is.
Yes, we are also going to be touching on communications or comms, as we like to call them.
Discord was a big help, but it doesn't stop people where they need to stay silent and do their job properly.
Right. We'll be touching on that. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so someone earlier raised up raised up a point about as a healer, as a support role, it's kind of my job, or it could be my job as to be a raid lead, right? So a lot of people ask me this question as well: which role/position is it easiest or best to raid lead from? So this will depend on the player, but from my experiences and from watching others, the easiest roles tend to either be, to raid lead from, tend to either be the tank or healer for a lot of people. There are, of course, really exceptional players like Karma, who we mentioned, RNC also, who can raid lead from a DPS position and not have their performance be too affected by raid leading. Because raid leading, when you're talking and stuff like that, and when you're calling for horns and telling people what to do during the fight or before a fight, sometimes that does affect your performance quite a bit, right? So this is up to you. If you feel like your numbers are suffering too much as a DPS from raid leading, you could consider, going to a more support role, because things tend to be, also, there's a different perspective from the support role as well at times. In regards to why people are dying, are these ads stacked correctly, stuff like that. So this will depend on you. It also, for whatever reason, tanks are in short supply for ESO. So a lot of raid leads tend to kind of just take over the tanking role, and that's why also you'll see a lot of raid leads be a tank. Just to clear that up. And okay, so comms. I think Saint just raised up a really good point in regards to communications and calls. I've seen it all. I've seen too much comms. I've seen too little. I've seen none. Too much. So what is too much? So Saint raised a good point. People are panicking. People are talking way too much. People are kind of talking about irrelevant stuff when you're pulling a boss or trash, or talking during a fight when there's not, when there shouldn't really be talking, right? I mean, I'm not gonna tell everyone to shut the fuck up or tell everyone that.
Yes, you will.
No. Okay, like I said, it'll depend on the group. I'm not gonna tell you guys to tell everyone to shut the fuck up or anything. I don't want you guys to tell people don't have fun, because people often interpret the raid lead telling them, you guys, you gotta be quiet or clear comms as them being jerks. And this ties in with what someone early on in the lecture raised earlier: how to not sound like a Quake, how to not sound like a douchebag, how to not sound like an asshole. But objectively speaking, comms is pretty important. It sometimes distracts people, but it sometimes doesn't do anything for the group. Again, it will depend on the group as well. Are they experienced in the content? If so, joke away, whatever, talk about whatever you want, I guess. It really depends on the goals in the group. And too much also can mean the raid lead as well. So if you're a raid lead, and I think a lot of you want to be a raid lead, I've seen a lot of raid leads in the past talk too much. It's not necessarily bad, but for example, a raid lead I watched, I think it was like 3 years ago, he was basically micromanaging almost every single thing that everyone should be doing. Like stand here, DPS, light attack, whatever. That's too much. Sometimes you just gotta let people do their jobs, let them concentrate, and recognize when you should call out things, recognize if you should delegate things as a raid lead. That's pretty important. It's not just up to you. Again, this is a group effort. It's not just up to you to call out every single thing. At one point or another, you're gonna let the healers and tanks do their own thing. If you're a DPS raid lead, they should know at a certain point, if you've run the content together a lot of times, if things are going the way it should, they should know when to horn. You shouldn't always be like, horn here, horn there, horn, you know what I mean? So delegation is pretty important. And with the addition of major vulnerability in the form of the Colossus, sometimes you can't always call out when people should Colossus on trash or boss fights. So that also may need delegation as well. Also, in regards to no communication, this often happens when the group is sort of new. No one's kind of sure who's going to take charge. No one's sure who should call what. No one wants to step on each other's toes, right? But also, no communication can also be perfect on the opposite side of the coin, because, again, it depends on the experience level of your group. If people in your group have done, let's say, I don't know, Ethereum Archive or Halls of Fabrication 1,000 times, sometimes, like most of the time, people don't really need to talk. They just kind of do their own thing. So, yeah, That's in regards to communication. And as for a raid lead, when you should tell people to clear comms, obviously, again, you obviously want everyone to have fun. You also want yourself to have fun, but just keep a mind on if you think it's too much, just try to note what they're saying and when they're saying it. It's okay for a healer to say, for example, during being phase on Locustes, like whatever they need to say, but if they're saying other things that don't fit in within the context of the situation, just be like, yeah, just clear comms a little bit. And yes, as Layman mentioned, depending on your group and who's in them, yes, you can tell them to shut the fuck up. Or with friends. Okay, so rosters and compositions. I think someone, I don't know who it was, raised up the raid compositions. Agents, I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so what should you bring to raids as a raid lead? And this is also a problem where a lot of the players who come into this game kind of have an issue with raid leads or raid teams. They think it's a matter of dictatorship. It's a matter of we control what you should play. It's not really a matter of controlling what you should play. Again, this will depend on what you want to do as your group. And how far you want to min-max or optimize your raid composition will entirely be dependent on your goal. And of course, at times with your group. I put out 2 videos. I don't probably watch the bottom one later if you want, but basically you just want to make sure you have your minor passives and stuff covered, like minor prophecy, minor sorcery, if you're magic composition. A lot of people come here to this Discord and ask the professors, well, what's the best raid composition? I get that. Like I see this question so many times, it makes me want to shoot myself. What's the best raid composition? And you know, they want to copy what the best groups are doing, you know, what the highest scores are, but that may not be great for your group. Because again, like, let's say your group, most of your group is only comfortable with stamina DPS. And you're expecting these results as a raid lead, like really good results as a raid lead when you switch them over or have them switch over to Magicka DPS. It's not going to work. Or it may work, but it's going to take a lot of time. But,
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. About the composition regarding to specific raids.
Yes.
Is there like certain raids that are more friendly or better optimized by Magicka or by stamina, where you should choose or mix it according to whichever raid you're doing?
Right. So for Cloud Rest and Asylum Sanctorum particularly, most groups will be most comfortable with Magicka DPS compositions. However, Magicka DPS compositions in general, for progression, if you're going to raid lead a progression group, just for clear, is going to be the safest. They get more health than their stam DPS counterparts do, typically, if you're on the min-max build. They obviously have access to shields. They're also ranged, which may have them more safe in certain fights where being close to the boss or to certain mechanics is not very good. And I'm gonna tell you guys right now, the Kind's Aegis, the new trial coming out, it'll probably, like most endgame groups, will probably go into the Magicka DPS compositions. Because also for even Sunspire, before people figured out Stamcrow, people were considering Magicka DPS compositions. Why? Because Magicka DPS compositions tend to be safer for progression. You tend to learn a bit more before you die too much. But again, there's no best raid composition, usually. Depends on the group. Depends on how much you want to min-max. As for a mixed
comp... 12 people you can...
Sorry, go on.
So it depends on what 12 people you can get.
Yeah, pretty much. But you can look at ESO logs or reference and stuff like that for inspiration. And I like to tell people, don't think about what people are bringing to raids when you look at these logs of the best groups or whatever. Think about why they're doing it. Why do they have a sword healer? Why do they have a Nightblade tank? Why do they have, I don't know, 5 Magicka DKs? Ask yourself these questions. Try to think more critically about why. Then you can mold your group to whatever composition you may think is best for your goal/group. As for mixed compositions, I'm a bit biased because I've had my share of raid leading mixed compositions for both organized and pug groups. Mixed compositions tend to be a lot harder, especially for support roles to organize around. So, for example, if you have 4 stamina DPS and 4 magic DPS in the group, what is the healer gonna wear? Are they gonna wear Hersings? Worm? What's the tank gonna wear? Worm or Hersings? Or who's gonna wear Holofang? You know what I mean? So supports tend to get clogged up if you try to bring in, mixed composition. Not to say you can't raid with mixed composition. It may just kind of be a bit more awkward. Otherwise, yes, mixed compositions can be fine. Just really depends. But however, I would strongly recommend either or mag or stam at this moment. Obviously, things can change. Does anyone have any questions about raid compositions or raid leading from the best role/position? Or comms? Anything you want to share before we move on?
One comment on just compositions. It's rather than just going and thinking about what DPS are the highest overall, you should also think about what do my players do the highest DPS on. Because sometimes, Mag DK is the highest DPS, but somebody might be shit at Mag DK and outparse the entire group on a Mag Sork. And putting them on a Mag DK would harm your group rather than help it. And things like that.
Okay, anyone else want to make a comment or have a question about Raycom?
I kind of have a question. So
okay.
I'm looking to kind of get into a serious progression group on this next trial. And I used to raid like WoW Mythic, but in WoW Mythic, like when you hit a wall, you can always go and farm Mythic Plus or get better gear because it's a gear creep. While this game is more flat. What do you do when you kind of hit that wall? Yeah.
Nethys, you want me to answer that? Speaking as someone that does Mythic dungeons
sure,
and raiding.
go for it. I don't have much experience in Mythic raids. Wow.
So speaking as someone that literally just got out of Mythic Plus, I was extremely undergeared for and got hard carried by. In ESO, it's far more about learning mechanics and understanding group synergy. So usually when you hit a wall, there's almost always a specific reason, whereas in WoW, it's usually a stats issue, right? Do you agree where it's like if you're hitting a wall and everyone knows what they're doing, it's a stats, right? Stat prog, right?
Right. Next week, come back with more gear,
Yeah, you come back with more gear, more stats. And while, you can be slay main and always be under geared for all the content you're doing and just try and outskill it and then get yelled at by your group, ESO is a little bit different. If there's something going wrong, it's usually not going to be a stats thing. Like the difference between purple and gold gear isn't going to be what's going to be making or breaking your Godslayer progression usually, right? You need to, as a raid lead, you're going to need to really, really, really study logs. When you're hitting a wall, it's because people are dying, right? ESO has almost zero enrage mechanics. WoW has like, what wasn't the issue in Mythic and Taurus? Because the Unmaker would enrage, right? It was a DPS race. ESO has very, very, very few true enrage mechanics. If you're hitting walls in progression, it's because people are dying. And as a raid leader, you're going to need to study those logs and understand why. If you're doing Asylum Sanctorium progression and you have people dropping dead every time, is it because of Defiled Blasts? Is it because of Storm the Heavens? Is it because tanks are dropping? Is it because healers aren't kiting? Is it people are dying to, poison that they can see and are lying about invisible, or just because it's invisible poison? Walls in ESO are far more mechanics oriented than stats oriented, because stats as a thing in ESO are the least significant of probably any MMO in the last 10 years, almost without exaggeration. Like everyone has the same stats and everyone has access to the same stats within a week of farming any year. Like ESO's gear grind is almost non-existent relative to the MMO market, right?
It's very horizontal rather than vertical.
Very, very horizontal. Very horizontal.
But when you do hit a wall in ESO, just like Simon said, it tends to be mechanics based, but like he also mentioned, sometimes it can be numbers based as well. In terms of DPS, for ESO, as a raid lead, what you should be almost always, not almost always, but sort of have in the back of your mind as in ESO, damage is king. There's no way in sugarcoating it. In a higher group DPS group, you won't see mechanics. You'll be skipping mechanics. You'll be seeing a lot less of the boss fight. Trash will be significantly less dangerous. So when you're raid leading or making a composition around a team, just kind of keep damage in the back of your mind. That makes sense. But also, yes, you gotta recognize when it's a mechanics issue, and that's the slaming son.
I had a quick question. So, is there somewhere we can reference where what each class would bring to the raid?
You basically want
like
Like
what class
has a
buffs?
video for that?
Yeah, I guess I have a question based on it. I don't know if it'll answer yours as well, but you were saying how why is someone bringing a Nightblade tank or a Sword Healer? Is there a reason why we shouldn't bring that? Because doesn't every class kind of bring something to the table in the raid?
So that would depend on raid composition. So let's say, I'm going to give a pretty detailed example here. Let's say you are doing a Magicka DPS composition, right? Now, if you look at the, buffs offered by, let's say, a Nightblade tank, why do stamina DPS compositions bring a Nightblade tank? For the minor, weapon crit passive they offer? I forget if it's minor savagery, right? From crit damage. That's why stamina DPS compositions bring them, because one, if you bring a Stamblade, not a lot of players are really good with Stamblades either. But if you bring a Stamblade in comparison to, let's say, a Stamina Necromancer, they tend to do less for most players. That's why, okay, we're gonna stick the weakest rolls in terms of perception, with the weakest rolls on the supports, but they can still provide the buffs we need while we put the strongest DPS classes on the DPS. But then, why do you need a Nightblade tank for a Magicka DPS composition? You can bring it, but you don't really need it, because the minus average they offer is weapon crit, not spell crit, not spell damage. Instead, you could consider, I don't know, a Templar healer/tank for their minor sorcery. You could consider bringing a sorcerer healer instead of a sorcerer DPS for their minor prophecy. It's kind of like puzzle pieces. You kind of fit different pieces together and see what works best for your group. Right now, I can tell you the strongest DPS class is Magicka Dragon Knight. So let's say you're a raid lead and you're thinking to yourself, okay, the majority of our DPS is going to be Magicka the Dragon Knights with maybe 3 or 4 Magicka Necromancers. What should the supports be? To try to fit the Magicka DKs. What should their support roles be? And that'll depend on what the support classes can bring. So you're gonna bring obviously either a sorcery healer. You probably bring a Templar healer, or it could be a Templar tank or a sorcerer tank, vice versa. The support roles kind of tend to be more flexible in that regard. Does that kind of answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
In regarding
My
to
question.
support, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
My question is, obviously, if I'm going to take 5 Magicka DKs in there, is there still the issue with the Talons overriding, so only one of them can run the Talons Elfbane?
Yes, only one of them can run Talons Elfbane at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Regarding to the support roles of a healer, let's say, talking about Templars and Wardens, regarding to Magicka support and Stamina support, what would be, I know it's situational, of course it's going to be situational, what in your opinion would be the best to bring into a progression? A healer, a Warden healer, or a Templar healer?
If you had to choose one or the other?
Yeah.
And there's no other Warden.
I'm sorry?
If there's no other Warden, is there a Warden tank?
No, I'm just considering, because I do have a Warden healer too. I have both, a Warden healer and a Warden Templar, a healer Templar. And so I'm kind of thinking about the buffs in terms of buffs for the group.
In terms of buffs for the group, let's look at we gotta look at the class as well. Let's look at what the warrior class offers. Minor vulnerability in the form of fetcher, minor toughness, which is additional health given, max health given to the group. It also is very, very good at healing output, so I would pick the warden in that scenario. But again, like you said, it will be situational. It will depend on the group composition. It will depend on a lot of stuff. And this is why I dislike it when people always ask these questions of what's the best composition? Because really, it's gonna depend. And if you want to look,
how do you calculate that? How do you come by to really make a decision about what you want on your team in regards to the support that you're going to choose between a healer or a warden? What are the main, let's say, the basic things you should consider before you decide that? Is it the gear that the DPS is using? Is the helms, the monster helms that the tanks would be, or the players are wearing? Is it a combination of everything?
It's pretty much a combination of everything.
Another question kind of based on that. So like the IA set gives minor vulnerability, correct?
Yes.
And then the Warden Fetcher ability also does it as well?
Correct.
So like is there a reason why you should bring that one skill over the entire set? So like to just like completely take away the IA set from another support role and not have a warden, or make sure to have a warden in all situations but never run that set? Like does it really matter?
Well, it's actually more that the skill replaces the set, not that the set can replace the skill.
Right.
Because there are way better sets than IA that'll do other things for you and still give you all the things that IA gives you outside of that minor vulnerability. So it's easier to replace one skill than it is to replace an entire set of gear.
Right.
But isn't like Magical Warden a very low DPS class compared to like other ones if you're trying to talk about min-maxing?
But you would use that as
you would have a warden healer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, warden healer, warden tank. Yeah, there's many options for that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah,
But you do want a warden in every group?
Because of minor toughness.
Yeah, for
Generally.
most groups, yes.
Generally, yeah, if you can.
They also give a restoration passive. It's minor intellect versus major from the potion.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference sustain as well. Wardens are one of the most loaded support in there.
Yeah, so we can talk about class passes and all that and how they fit. It's a really cool topic that not a lot of people like to talk about because they see it as, oh, that's toxic, that's making me play something I don't want to do. But it's actually pretty fun to theory craft with compositions, as you guys can see from this discussion.
Just from a suggestive point of view, honestly, study your classes.
Right.
That is one of the best thing. That is one of the best pieces of advice I can give other raid leads is study your classes, see what they're bringing, pay attention to patch notes, see what's getting changed. Because those are things that are going to change. It's just like when IA went dead because they gave minor vulnerability to that skill. So it helps to pay attention and then talk to other end game raid leaders because they're going to be the ones that can give you suggestions. Sometimes just bouncing ideas off of each other will help you figure out what's going to work best for your raid composition. But then again, it still all comes down to the people. What are they going to be comfortable? What are they going to be comfortable playing, and what are they going to be comfortable running? And does their comfort, as far as what they're using, fit with what you're trying to do, or do you need to find somebody else who can run what you're looking for?
So, Nefis,
I have a question about wardens.
Yes.
My understanding is that if you've got 2 healers and 2 tanks, out of those 4, one of them will run a warden in that class. And I'm under the impression that you always want a warden in your group because the minor toughness is such a powerful passive. Is that correct?
Yes, for most groups, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
So given the variation in raid composition, my primary goal is to always, kind of be the tank. That's the class I prefer playing, the class I like the best. Would it behoove me to basically have the ability to pull a tank of every class to add those benefits to the raid, depending on what the composition ends up being
Yes.
because it can change from run to run.
So are you asking if it's better? It's like good to have all classes or something?
Yeah, so basically, would it be best for me as a raid lead to have, and as a tank, to have a class, a tank in every class, in order to provide the variation that's needed based off of what your raid composition is?
Oh yeah, it's always good to have as many classes as you can play available, especially as a raidling, because, like, for myself as an example, in my current Godslayer group, I went from being a main tank / Dragon Knight to a Mag Necromancer, then from Mag Necromancer to a Magicka Sorcerer, then to a Magicka Dragon Knight, then back to a Magicka Necromancer, then back to the tank. So as a raid lead, you often, like we talked about earlier, sometimes shit happens. Sometimes you gotta fill up your roster. Sometimes the fills you end up with may not have the classes you're looking for, or maybe just shit happens and you just gotta fill up the holes by yourself. So I would, advise you as a raid lead to just have at least a couple other classes ready for your role. This depends. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, basically that's what I'm doing now. Is I have everything except for Nightblade. I'm working on Nightblade right now.
Right.
I've only been playing the game maybe I'm coming up on my 4th month. I'm a little over 400 CP, so that's what I'm kind of focusing on, is getting to that point where I have that depth that I can choose from. Yeah,
but also understand it's not just you, but you also grow with the team as well. Like the team grows with you. So oftentimes it's kind of weird. It gets more restricted as the team gets more experienced in terms of bringing stuff. That makes sense. But yeah, someone asked about where can we see the various buffs and debuffs different classes offer. In this video, the bottom one right here, there's a chart. Oh, in both videos, there's charts. The same chart that shows you the minor buffs and passives that the groups or classes provide. So if you're interested in checking out that, I'll also like copy paste the image or spreadsheet into this Discord after the lecture for those of you interested. Does anyone else have any questions about raid composition, communication, and role before we move on?
I had a question about comms. If you're kind of newer to the raid lead role with experienced people,
yes.
I guess I wanted to know how to combat being talked over, or if there's too many opinions. Now, I guess everyone with the experienced players, everyone comes from different backgrounds or how they did it.
Right.
So just kind of how to combat that as a raid lead when you want to get into raid leading.
So that can often play into both personalities and your goal as a group. So oftentimes, if people are like when you decide on the group, when you decide on forming a group together or whatever, you have to talk with your group members. There's no way around it. You gotta talk with them. Okay, what do you guys want to do first, and how do you guys want to go about it? And you basically say, okay, so I'm the raid lead. You guys can say whatever, but ultimately you can also decide, hey, I'm the raid lead. This is my decision is the final say. You can do it like that, or you can sort of just take the feedback. Like, don't take it as them talking over you or saying that my way is the best way. Take it as feedback, and just kind of decide from there. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know how to describe it.
Could I something I found really useful is having a chat with people before you start the actual action of the raid.
Right.
I organize raids with a raid leader who's much more experienced than me. He's used to leading groups that are far, far better than the groups that I'm organizing. And he will choose strats that work very, very well for like endgame groups, but aren't always so appropriate for the groups that he's actually raid leading with me. And so I'll just have a chat with him beforehand about what strategies he's going to choose, suggest some kind of cheesier, easier strategies. And I'll kind of ask his I'll kind of ask his permission. I'll say, like, if this doesn't work after the fourth or fifth pull, could we then try this one? And just kind of get that stuff sorted before we actually start the raid. So when we start the raid, there isn't a kind of conflict. I don't know if that might work with your group. If there are different strategies being suggested, you could perhaps talk them through beforehand.
Right.
And then decide whether or when to choose different strategies depending on how things are going.
It's very situational. Like it's very situational on the group and the personalities especially. So it's.
And I'm assuming like if the personalities are kind of just clashing with me as a raid lead, it's probably not going to work out as a group.
Yeah, well, I'd say like 80% of the time, unfortunately, it probably won't work out if what happens is in the groups I've been in, or rather the groups I've seen, when people start yelling at each other or argue with each other constantly, it just sort of doesn't end well most of the time. Although again, it depends on the group. Can the group handle it, or can the group not handle it?
I think as someone who's very confrontational in groups, being that I'm very experienced, I've completed most content in the game, and I'm very strongly opinionated. What works best when dealing with me is, okay, after the raid is done and dusted, then just go and have a word with that person and just say, look, it's not working. It wasn't working in the current group that I'm with now, so the raid lead come and spoke to me and was just like, okay, right, what we'll do is it's just not working. So just unplug your mic, turn up to the raid, unplug your mic, no comms.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's not my feedback, or there's not me frustrated getting in the background because I've done the content, and people making silly mistakes and stuff like that. Because communication is probably the biggest part of raid leading, even outside of the raid, making sure that there's the open lines of communication between everybody in the group. So if there is problems arising, that the group can work them out as a group, rather than someone feeling, that their issues are not being heard, or they're not being actioned on by the group.
Right, and that's actually the next slide, because we're getting into the human part of the raid leading. So yeah, as Quick just eloquently summed up, it's not just in the raids you have to raid lead. A lot of times, it's also out of raids. The relations you build amongst the group and between yourself and other people. It sounds pretty corny, but I mean, it's very human. It's a very human thing. You gotta make sure, you can't always please everybody, but you gotta make sure things aren't at the very least, hostile, or getting out of hand, or getting too hyper aggressive. So it often comes down to sometimes, like reaching out to people, even if you may not want to. Or if they don't want to reach out to you. The thing with this too, there's also appropriate and inappropriate times to do this. You don't want to kind of just, approach somebody in front of other people in voice comms, because that's sort of like taken as too confrontational. You just want to take it to, either a private voice chat or, PMs. So there's that as well. The out of raids relations. And also in the raid's relations, because if you hate somebody in the raid team, like, just take yourselves out of the raid lead perspective for now. I mean, as a raid lead, we all, of course, just have the goal in mind usually, or at the very least want the group to succeed, right? But take yourself out of the raid lead perspective for a moment, but because I'm sure we've all been there, you probably don't like a certain somebody in the raid team.
I hated Nephis when I raided.
And you don't, and then what ends up happening is you don't want to go to the raid. Right? Because you don't want to deal with that shit or that person. And when you don't want to go to the raid, you perform, less. So sometimes it may not just be about how skilled the player is, it may just be that they're not enthusiastic, or they're burnt out, or they just don't want to be there. So it's really important to keep this in mind, because this will tie into how the rest of your group's going to perform, right? Everyone's going to be on the same page. Like previous slide said, the hardest part, consistency and performance. It's not just consistency of your numbers, it's also about the consistency of your group. Everyone's got to be on the same page. Everyone's got to know, the raid time and day. Everyone's got to know how to act, or not how to act, but what we're there for, what the group is there for. More so than the egos that may arise, or situations that may arise. One thing I want to get into before we talk about other stuff, and here's the what I was going to talk about, the logs. And again, for ESO logs tutorial, I'll also link the video after the lecture from the Asian Gods channel. He goes over pretty much everything in ESO logs, if you're curious about how to navigate it. And if you still have questions about like raid compositions, or I think we briefly touched on it as well, strategies that may be outdated and other things, this Discord server is here for you. This isn't just, okay, come to this class, take notes, and you're done. This is a constantly evolving game, and thus a constantly evolving raid environment. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in this Discord anytime. You can add the professors, you can add me, PM the professors, PM me, so that's just something to always keep in mind. But yeah, let's talk about perfection versus progress. And I was talking to one of the raid leads in PCNA RNC, and he made it a point for me to bring it up to you guys, especially for those of you who may be starting with experienced groups, or maybe you're an experienced player starting to get into raid leading, and you're also raid leading other experienced players. A lot of people get very discouraged when they put together a lot of good players and expect everything to go perfectly. A lot of raid nights, as you'll see on Twitch streams, and not the YouTube videos. The YouTube videos are products. The YouTube videos are results. So don't look at the YouTube videos as something to follow as a process. That's just a result.
In fact, Nephis is doing.
What?
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I was helping somebody with raid leading, and I realized I was unmuted.
Oh, okay. You're fine. It's okay for your raid nights to be bad. Like 90% of your raid nights will probably be bad for new groups or even for experienced groups. And so instead of perfection, instead of wanting the result immediately or expecting things to go well, think about the progress instead. Don't think about the result. Like, where were you at 10 p.m. versus where you were at 8 p.m.? Are you improving? Is the group learning? Are people still dying to the same thing over and over? What needs to be fixed? So that's something important that needs to be brought up, because a lot of people end up making groups, end up expecting the groups to perform really well, and oftentimes it doesn't, and that can get very discouraging or frustrating, and that just kind of devolves into some other nonsense usually. But yeah, that's what I want to mention.
Nephis, I struggle with this actually.
Okay.
On my teams, and here's the struggle that I have. How long do you put up with bad nights? Because I will tell you, I've been raid leading for 2.5 years, and invariably we'll lose players to teams that are clearing content faster, doing content better, and it just feels like there's this constant revolving door. I can't hold on to players, and
I have that same problem big time.
I don't know what to do. It's like this game makes it so difficult to have a consistent team, because Team A is clearing, VSS hard mode. Why aren't you doing it? Why are we stuck on this boss? I'm just going to jump over to them.
Yeah.
And that that makes it very frustrating as a raid lead.
Yeah, I've been there a lot. I've as an example, the current Godsnare progression group I'm in, it's been a rough road, because it's always been constantly filling. People are either quitting the game, leaving for other groups, or just can't show up. So it's the burnout is real. Like you just want to stop. You just want to leave the raid lead and somebody else, and that's fine. That's perfect. That's perfectly fine. That I think every single raid lead in history has experienced it. From who I mentioned, from the best raid leads to the worst raid leads, everyone's experienced it. As for what to do, so the first part of this issue is, why isn't your group clearing? Is it because of certain players, or are people not taking it seriously, or is everybody on the same page? Because maybe not everyone is on the same page. I don't know what your specific scenario is. And of course, I was going to talk about this next as well. You know, people going to other teams and stuff like that. But I don't think there's a clear-cut solution for all of us here as to what you should do. But this kind of ties back in with networking as well, whether it's through Discord or elsewhere, but primarily through Discord. And it's going to be a tedious process in which you are going to have to end up sort of maybe taking a break or seeing actually who's interested. I've seen some raid leads kind of step back, say, okay, this group's disbanded. And, you know, maybe after a week or 2 weeks of a break, they say, okay, I'm going to make a new group. Then you clearly outline what the goals are. You outline what the expectations are, and see who signs up. That's what I've done too in the past. So I don't know if that could be a consideration for you, Dragon, or if maybe the current groups you're raid leading are up for maybe reconsidering, I don't know, a makeover of a kind.
Well, I actually did that. I did that with my current team.
Okay.
I sat down and had to come to Jesus, essentially. And I told them, you know, this is what the objective is. This is the time frame I want to reach the objective.
Right.
And no one's position is secure. You need to prove to me that you can actually do this and you're committed. And everybody has stuck with it. Our biggest problem right now is desyncs and HOF. So
yeah.
and that stuff you can't control.
Oh yeah.
And I get that. But it just seems to add another
more
layer
stress.
Of frustration.
Yes.
But I mean, it definitely helped doing that. The people that I've lost within the last couple of weeks, it's been specifically because of that. Had nothing to do with the team or the composition, but it's a very real consideration and problem in the game, and it's been in the game ever since I've raided. But it's worked for this team so far, and I think everybody has the same goal and objective. It's just unfortunately the game is not.
I mean,
nice.
Yeah, where the game is concerned, unfortunately, we just have to wait. Yeah, it's. I don't know what to tell you guys, either as a class rep or a player, but unfortunately, we just have to wait. It's unfortunately we can't get around it. I know it's frustrating. It's like raid leading. You're in the submarine, and the game's the fucking ocean, and it's trying to crush your fucking existence. But but you just gotta grit your teeth and get through it. That's the best way I can say. And you know, it's okay. And we'll talk about this at the end of the lecture. It's okay to get burnt out. It's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to just take a break. It's okay if the game is shit. Kind of, not really okay, but like you just gotta wait at times at various points. And
can I chip in on this?
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't really have very much constructive to say because some of my runs have just been shedding people because of the recent performance issues and how, you know, we started an Immortal Redeemer run like a month ago and it's been kind of unplayable. So that's not happening anymore. But what I found is instead of running a raid group of 12 people with a couple of reserves, moving it back into a small guild of about 40 to 50 people, it's kind of made the runs a little more viable. We don't have a stable group anymore, but we've got a kind of semi-stable group, and it's not ideal, and the performance issues are still affecting us, but we can always fill. So, I mean, I don't know how big the group of people you're raiding with is, but if you can broaden your pool a little bit so you can just get the fills, you can keep raiding despite, you know, the disappointments of the game. I'm sorry, I don't know what your situation is or if that's at all relevant to you.
No, I mean, I run a guild of about 350 people, and this one team is actually a culmination of several failed teams that I've had for various reasons, but I learned my lesson. It's still a very real consideration, and fortunately, I've been able to replace some people who have taken breaks or who have left the game. But it's still something that I always keep in the back of my mind. It's actually something that's kind of it's internalized stress I put on myself because, you know, we may be like beating our heads up against a particular boss mechanic and I'm poring over the logs, and I'm like, holy crap, how long am I going to have before people get frustrated and leave? And even though the atmosphere is different, I mean, that really weighs on your mind. And I think that the current composition is working. It's just they all understand the situation is with the game and not with the team. But it's just a frustration
I feel
that
you.
I don't hear talked about. You know,
Oh,
I mean,
I hear it talked about a lot. It's it's really frustrating at the moment. I'm sorry you're having a hard time. I'll stop there.
It's so gratifying to hear people have the same problems. You know, we're not alone in what's going on with everything. I've really enjoyed finding out that we're not alone.
Yeah, the problems
with our struggles.
the problems facing raid leads is very universal, and it often doesn't change every patch, unfortunately. So, but again, yeah. In the meantime, for sure, keep networking, keep reaching out to people, ask if there's any more Discords, you know, where you can take fills from, whatever. Also, one thing. Sorry, I lost track in my mind. Yeah, definitely use this Discord as a resource. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about before we move on to the next slide, if there is a next slide, I forget. Interactions with other teams. So it's also, as a raid lead, it doesn't just come down to how you interact with your own members. It sometimes also comes down to, unfortunately, it involves you interacting with other teams. And a controversial subject that pops up usually every patch or so is when, you know, you guys are familiar that the in-game community, or even the amount of people that raid in this game is very small compared to the rest of the player base. That's both a good / bad thing. The bad thing is you have a very limited pool of people to draw from. Everyone has their own raid days. Everyone has their own raid schedules. One way to circumvent this is to usually try out, you know, people trying to get into raiding, and that's often a risk, which is fine. It just depends on how far you're willing to work with the people you take. Because it goes back to the attitude too, with what Kush said. Yeah, it tells a lot about somebody, how they react when things go wrong, but also what I would like to add to his answer in regards to, as a raid lead, what do you look for in a player? You should look for people who are, like, hungry. And by hungry, I mean, like, they wanna do it. Like, you shouldn't... It's really tempting as a raid lead to take a really good player, or a really good experienced player, for your team. But at the same time, they'll probably leave. If the goal is not being met, they'll probably leave. They're just kind of there. They're just kind of there for the achievement or something. You know what I mean? So definitely look for players that want to do raiding, that want to do things together as a team. That they're not just there for their own benefit. I mean, technically, to an extent, everyone's kind of raiding for their own benefit, but you know what I mean, right? You don't want to be too easily swayed by, okay, this guy has really good numbers, but he might leave. Whereas the other guy, well, he's only doing like 60k DPS, but he'll probably stay and he'll probably improve. We'll probably enjoy having him around more so than the other player. So things like that, scenarios like that, you should definitely consider. One controversial thing for sure I keep mentioning is poaching. What is poaching? So this is, I don't really like the word poaching, because oftentimes when the endgame player base sort of is so small, you sort of tend to commit incest with one another. You have a lot of people from one roster, or one team, or one guild end up in another guild or another roster. So what is poaching? Poaching, I don't like it. It's a word some people have used in the past to refer to guilds that are taking players from other guilds, or rosters taking from other players from other rosters. But really, poaching, I don't really like it, because it implies that people don't really have a free will or choice. People will raid with whoever they like, or whoever they want to raid with. So I see this happen, like the accusations of poaching happen quite a lot between a lot of mid-tier raiding guilds, because again, you don't have too many people to draw from. But just keep in mind, if you see someone from your own team raid on another day or time with a different team, don't freak out. I've seen a lot of raid leads freak out, and they kind of put extreme or unnecessary measures or rules in place, which ironically turns people off from raiding with you. So keep that in mind. Shared rosters is fine. What comes down to it, for me personally as raid lead, I don't care who you raid with, as long as you show up for my raids. That's it. That's the end of the line. No more discussions, no more rules, nothing. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, no one has any questions about that. Next slide. Okay, so we touched on this quite a lot already. You guys beat me to it. Frustrations and burnout. It happens. I mean, it's not just exclusive to ESO's raid leads. It happens in World of Warcraft. It happens in other games. It happens. So whatever. It happens. Just do your best to not lash out at your team. And if your team members are, starting to get frustrated or burnout, just kind of, again, referring back to the previous slide, go back to communicating with them. It's not just in the raids you have to communicate with them, it's also outer raids. Does anyone have any questions about that? Oh fuck, wrong one. Does anyone have any questions about frustrations and burnouts, or want to vent anything? Shit.
Frustrations is more like about the game itself. It is for me. I burned out when Morrowind came with the heavy attack meta. Then I returned a month later, still playing with Quake. Then I take a break for a year after the performance got really shafted, and only come back like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
My problem with the game is not only about some of the players that it has, but basically it is the performance issues that fluctuates all over the place.
Yeah, and Dragon brought this up as well. The performance is like it's not just internal factors you need to keep an eye on, it's also external factors, unfortunately, which in this case includes the game itself.
I was going to say, at the moment, performance, while ZeniMax don't help the situation, I don't think we can firmly blame all of the performance issues on them right now with the world economy.
Definitely not their fault. When there's a coronavirus outbreak out there, there is
right. It's a server load issue as well.
They can do at the moment.
But the point is, shit happens. So the best thing is just to stick with it if you can, and if you can't, what?
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you can't, and I've been here too. I don't know if it's happened to you guys yet or whatever, but sometimes as a raid you feel almost entirely responsible for, if the group fails, it's your fault somehow. Or if you need to disband the guild, or disband the group, or that you just can't find fills or whatever, and you're just burnt out, but at the same time you don't want to let it go, it's fine. I've been there. Just let it go if you need to. At that point, it's not really a game if you keep getting stressed out and frustrated to the point that you're constantly thinking about disbanding, but you just don't want to. So if you ever had that thought, it's okay. I've been there. A lot of people have been there. It's okay to just take a break. Not, if your group disbands, okay, they're probably gonna, your group members will probably find other groups. It's not all on you. You don't hold the world.
Regarding to frustration in your group as a leader, and your personal experience, what measures can you do or take with the group to alleviate a little bit of frustration during the difficult times when you hit a wall, when you don't progress? What in your experience do you do with your team besides just talking, or do you take breaks, or do you decide to postpone that progression for a couple of days so everybody. So, well, what are your personal measures?
I would personally not postpone raids, if possible. It's okay if you run into a wall and become frustrated, and how you deal with that, not just by yourself. You don't do it by yourself. You ask people, "Hey, we should talk," and then whether it's after a raid or before a raid, definitely talk with each other, work it out if you can, see what the issues are, try to be constructive. And a lot of people tend to take, from the Rayleigh perspective at least, a lot of people tend to take constructive feedback as attacks a lot of times. So definitely try to be kind of more neutral in your language. I know it's a pain, but like a lot of people do react defensively when you point out, okay, hey, you shouldn't have done that or whatever. Just you gotta talk it out in the open, is what I would say. And from my experience, yeah, that works out more often than just kind of like going back behind their backs and trash talking them and being like, this guy should, and then yeah, you just want to talk it out all in the open. Don't do any cloak and dagger shit if you can help it.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions about frustration or burnouts?
How do you deal with it?
Oh, no, I just told you.
No, I mean yourself as a person being frustrated in a certain aspect. What do you do to take that negative effect out of yourself, or your mind, or your body?
Kill Samaja one more time.
That's subjective.
Nephis has got 4 ferrets to keep him relaxed.
Yeah, and I punch the wall every time I get frustrated. That
Well, I wouldn't advise punching a wall, but I mean, whatever helps you de-stress. I mean,
weed, lots and lots of weed.
Yeah, I mean, okay, sure, why not? Whatever helps. Just don't kill yourself or methamphetamine or whatever.
Don't pepper yourself, as the kids say.
Yeah.
For me, it's waiting for the next episode of Nephis Casino.
No. Okay.
Nephis is a naughty boy. I've seen him.
Let's go to the next slide. All right.
Get half of the raid team together and go wreck whatever trial you're doing with only 6 people on normal. Just to, hey, remember what it feels like to destroy something.
Whatever.
As the youth say, that's cracked.
Whatever it takes. Okay.
You're a little late there.
So let's go over what the program is going to be. So the Rayleigh program. So I thought about this. I brainstormed it with the other professors. Like, how do we get more people interested in raiding? How do we get more raids going? And I've tried my own experiments. I've streamed myself, pugging from zone chat for VMall, ESO, stuff like that. But it's like trying to fucking drain the ocean with a bucket. So the point of the Rayleigh program is to not just teach people how to raid, but also teach other people how to raid lead. So you see where I'm going with this. You teach a man how to fish, not give him a fish every day. So what this Rayleigh program will cover, for those of you currently on PC North America, we will probably expand this Rayleigh program to PCU in the near future, probably by the end of this year. Outcast and I have been kind of thinking of going to console to sort of teach people, but that's kind of like up in the air. But first, on PCNA, this is going to be the Rayleigh program. VHRC Hormone, VAA Hormone, VSO Hormone, VMAW Hormone. Why are we doing these in this order? It's how I have and would form a progression group from scratch. A lot of people, a lot of players sort of skip the Cracklorn trials, either because they don't want to do it or because there's no gear there or whatever, like Reliquin or Locustes, right? Or second, they just don't know about it, and they sort of just hop into a Cloud Rest or Sunspire or Asylum. There's no order of progression for a lot of players these days, which is pretty horrific, because these 3 trials right here, VHRC, VA, VSO, teach every single person whether they're a tank or a healer or DPS, everything about their role. Everything. And then VMA, of course, will be the finale to this program, and we may expand this to, I mean, it really depends on the time consumption. If we knock these out, we can maybe move on to like Cloud Rest, because I know a lot of raid leads and raid teams have problems with Cloud Rest. Once a new trial comes out, maybe like next year we can start covering that as well, but for now, let's walk before we can run. We're gonna do the 3 Crackling trials and BMAW. And how this will work if you are on PC North America and you're interested. 11 signups, because I need to be there, unfortunately. We're gonna go over every single thing to know in the trial, including expected bugs and mechanics. We'll teach you to understand the viewpoint of every single role, like tank, DPS, healer. Even if you only play a healer, you'll understand, at least to a basic extent, what a tank should be doing. Right, because you know, a lot of people actually today in this Discord have been asking, well, how do I know I'm healing enough? How do I know my healers are healing enough? How do I know that's not my fault? We'll go over that for each of this content, and I'll force you guys to step out of your comfort zone and have different people raid lead at various points. And we'll probably do at least 2 raid days per week, and then this also ties back into how many days you should be raiding per week. I would definitely recommend a minimum 2 days, so we're gonna do at least 2 days per week for this program. Does anyone have any questions about this?
Where do I sign up?
Yeah, seriously.
Where do you sign up? Let me open it up right now. There's a channel right below the Raid Lead program channel in this Discord. I am gonna open it up. First come, first serve, basically. So first 11 signups. I'm sorry.
Wait, where?
Oh shit! Hold on, let me reset.
Damn.
Oh fuck. Okay, do you see the channel?
I can't type in it.
No, I don't see it.
Okay, I'm gonna delete every. I'm just, unfortunately we have limited spots, and I'm the only one doing this at the moment. So, okay, does it?
Are there any requirements to join? Or
no, there are no requirements. I don't care if you've never done a vet trial. I don't care if you don't even know what you're doing in Hell Raw or AA. I don't care if you don't know the mechanics. All I ask is that you come on your preferred role, and you keep an open mind.
So where do I find this? I can't find it.
It's in the Raid Leads Sign Up PCNA channel. Under that, scroll down in the Discord. We're way up. This voice chat is way up, and we have so many categories in this.
Raid Lead
Nefis, you have
program.
it set to read only.
Yeah, I know. I'm just waiting for people to find it, so everyone has a fair.
Raid Lead program. Sign-ups PC.
Yes,
PCN?
that one.
Okay,
does everyone have their eyes on it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'm gonna unlock the channel. First 11 people, good luck. Here we go.
So, wait.
Okay.
I win.
I still don't have permissions.
What? No, everyone has permissions.
It still hasn't unlocked permissions for me. I'm just sitting here like,
Jesus.
Nice.
Oh. I should have taken typing in high school. First step of raiding, learn how to type.
I don't think anybody wants to do it, Nefis.
Yeah. I didn't expect this to be too popular, because let me tell you guys something. You know, I was talking with Outcast earlier today, and I told him about this class, and he's like, best advice for raid leading class? He said in his Outcast voice, just run away. Because you gotta understand, I personally don't like, not to be depressing or anything, I don't personally expect a too high of a success rate with this program, because raid leading, not a lot of people can do it, or often can handle it after a while. So it's like, whatever. If you're confident that
Kills your soul.
Yes, if you're confident that you want to, keep raid leading or learn raid leading, then yes, sign up. If you don't feel like this is it for you, that's okay. You'll still be able to come to these classes. You'll still be able to hear in the comms, stuff like that.
I'm on PlayStation. I would love to lead trials, but I'm not confident enough. I don't know. I definitely could do like crack lines, but I'm also on PlayStation, so I'm out of luck for now.
Well, like I said earlier,
Level really builds as you do it. There's no way to get.
yeah. So raid leading is not. Some are, you know, it's like real life. Some are more natural at leadership, right? But raid leading, regardless of anyone, whoever it is, you have to hone it. You have to practice it. It's a practice thing. It's not just, oh, you're suddenly a raid leader, you're good to go. Huh? Here's your degree.
Nobody's ever stepped into raid leading and was good at it the first time.
Correct.
No,
correct.
Absolutely not.
Where's my quote? Oh, we already did it, aren't we?
Well, I mean, what do you consider successful as far as the program? Wouldn't that be more on us and what we take out of it, as opposed to I don't know.
What I would like to see is more people just take an interest in raiding and more raid groups forming. You know what I mean? That's what
For
my
sure.
idea of success is. Whether that's, you know, let's say 2 of you from the 11 continue to raid lead. That's in my book of success. Because I mean, I'll take anything at this point, you know. Yeah. But if it's all 11 of you and you make your own groups or teach people, that's not a success. That's a fucking miracle to me. So
I will say this though, as somebody who's come from other MMOs, the biggest hurdles I see is just how different ESO is in its handling of the social aspects. Like if you come from World of Warcraft or SOTOR or Final Fantasy, things are much more rigid, right? You belong to a guild, that's your group you raid, everything's kind of self-contained. But with ESO, with the 5 guilds, and it's like a big hippie commune. Everyone's you mentioned like kind of in incest, but everyone's kind of in bed with everybody else, and it can be difficult to try to wrap your head around that as like I said, even if you're a veteran of other MMOs, trying to come to grips or terms with how this game functions is drastically different.
That does make things very, very difficult. People can jump around wherever they want, and they know that. And it's not that you need to lock people in per se, but like, you know, how do you, once you get a consistent group, how do you keep them wanting to come back to your group, you know?
It's like fishing. Like if you're used to fishing in a lake and you get good at that, but now all of a sudden you're out deep sea fishing, it's a completely different task, right? It's still the same thing, but it's wildly different at the same time. And I think just trying to find stable footing is the biggest hurdle for people. I think more people want to raid and want to raid consistently than do, but they just struggle to find basically raid leaders, and raid leaders are struggling to find people because everyone's kind of just coming and going.
Well, right. That's the point of this program. More
Yeah,
raid leads.
so
there's that.
If I can just, there's 2 parts to this. When it and you're kind of hitting the nail on the head, but in part, you're talking about everybody being able to jump around and do whatever. It's a patience thing, and that also goes for the raid leader. It's going to take a while for you to build that base, and you can. The best thing to look at is some of these guilds. There are people who will start up a guild. That guild might sit at 4 or 5 members for a year, 2 years, before it starts growing. And the thing is as a raid lead, and as you get more used to leading raids, you'll find more ways to kind of have fun within the raid. Some raid leaders, they are locked down military style, freaking, you're going to come in, you're not going to talk, da-da-da-da. But really, a lot of that goes back to a couple slides ago when we covered etiquette and frustration. We talked a lot about frustration, but not a lot about raid etiquette, and just making sure that people's expectations are where they should be. You know, as far as a raid lead, the first thing I want to do is I want to kind of set expectations out there. And I don't always get to do it because there's a lot of times where, you know, even now as I'm starting up leading normal raids through the academy on PC, I'm bringing a character that's way below what I've got on PS4 and what I'm used to running on PS4. I don't have the depth. I don't have my healer. I don't have my tank. I've got a Magplar, and that's it. And I don't want to take the time right now to develop other tunes because I still haven't even finished developing this one. So I'm limited in what I can bring, but at the same time, for those who are in the chats, I try to be as clear as possible as to what we're kind of expecting as we go through. And so far, that's worked well. We've had people who have been there every week, and then we may pick up another one, and we may pick up another one after that. And I'm hoping that eventually that weekly thing that I'm doing just with normal raids and gear farms will grow into a regular group that I can kind of depend on showing up every week, because then we get to be, we get to coalesce into something. And that's the same thing that you're going to have to do as a raid lead. You're going to have, and this is where the networking comes in. Why it's such a big stress point is get people in to your raids, get them to understand what you're there for. And if your personalities aren't going to mesh, that's okay. Then they can move on. They can do something else. And you get an option to find somebody else, because the reality is that the biggest problem with the end game community is how fast do you want those achievements? How fast do you want those completions versus just raiding for the fun of it? I like raiding just for the fun of it. Getting the completes isn't that big of a deal to me. And it's not because I have them, because I don't have a lot of them. I haven't been given a lot of opportunities to get those completes, but at the same time, I like raiding with people that I like doing content with. And that's what's going to get you the farthest as a raid lead, is finding the people that you like doing the content with on a regular basis.
Oh, for sure. I agree.
Yeah, like we said earlier, it's just dependent on the group. Always set the expectations before you make the group, for sure. Sorry?
One thing about finding people is I've found that it can be very good to not just ask people to join your raids, but try and join as many runs with other people as you can, because then people get to know you better. And when you find someone and you're like, I would like this person on my team, and you ask them, they'll actually have some fucking idea who you are and what you can do. So they're more likely to say, oh yeah, I know who that is. I could join their team.
See, I do the same thing. I'll try to join a bunch of other Discords and run with other groups and stuff. But then, even when I do start to get to know people, I feel like I'm stepping on toes if I start, messaging, hey, I want this person. If I message this person and they leave this Discord to come to mine, am I an asshole for that? Or,
No.
So.
Like I said, okay, so 2 things. Rate Discord. Discord's really important. Like I said, even ZeniMax just recently, a multi-billion-dollar company made Discord. So there's a point. Definitely network. Don't be afraid to reach out. You won't lose anything. It's like the LinkedIn, right? You reach out to somebody you know. If they don't say anything back, you didn't lose anything, right? But if, let's say something happens, like they leave their team or something for your group. Again, this goes back to the concept of poaching, which really, it's ultimately to the individual. There's no such thing. So don't feel bad, And as a raid lead, if it happens to you that people leave for other teams, don't feel bad either. It's like, just find their people. And when people, in the past, when people left my raid team, they would give some of them would give bullshit excuses like, oh, my fucking grandmother is fucking in the hospital or something. But they're gonna leave for a raid team. So I'm just like, I don't care what your excuse is or reason. Just whatever. I'm gonna find them. Just focus on your next task at hand.
So that's another issue I have. So I'll get very invested in people, especially my support roles. DPS is kind of a dime a dozen in a way, and you can, if they're hitting the numbers, it really doesn't matter to me how they're doing it. But when it comes to support, you gotta know your tank, and you gotta have healers that are on point. So I focus so much time and I invest so much time when I find somebody I know is capable. And then I get so frustrated that 6 months down the road, I took this person from being brand new to the game, ran them 600 CP, and now they're just gone. They just leave for no reason.
Yeah, that can be tough if you invest the time with them. But that's sort of between you and them, really.
Well,
yeah.
I guess I should ask, do you put that investment in people, or do you just say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what's required, and if they show up, they show up, if they don't, they don't, and you just don't, how far of a personal level do you personally go into?
it depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like you tend to focus more on the support roles, right? But to me, it doesn't matter. It really depends on the person. If they're more, if they're like, if I'm straight up and they're also straight up honest with me, then we'll go from there. That's it. I don't try to, like, it sounds fucking cold and callous, but as a Rayleigh, you should never always put your eggs in one basket.
Right,
Or
yeah.
or just like bet on one person. Or invest too much on one person. I mean, eventually, there's a point at which time, eventually, you'll probably become really good friends with everybody. Best friends, even. A couple of the best friends, I've, played with in ESO. Rating. So, it just depends on the person.
I know one engaged couple and one very heavily dating couple, and they only just met through ESO.
That's cute.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of my biggest frustrations is, I'm very open to helping newer players get into group content and stuff like that, and that's kind of a focus of my guild. But I'll end up investing so much time into somebody, and I mean, like I said, I'll sometimes get someone who's just brand new. They don't even know what the healer sets are and stuff like that, and I get them on their way, and then they're just gone. So like, I've invested this much time. I guess I need to find a balance of like, how much time do I invest in people?
Well, where are they gone to is the question. Do they just quit the game, or?
Well, I don't know sometimes. Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't.
Oftentimes
they don't.
Disappear?
Yeah, one day I wake up and they've left the Discord. It's like, dude, I just spent a month teaching you how to use combat prayer. Like, what the heck?
That's weird. I mean,
That entirely depends on the person.
That's kind of weird.
The amount of time that Craig put into me, evolving me into a better player that I am today, is you can't put a price on it. Let me say it like that. And for me to one day just leave everything and everyone, or worse, going to another raid guild and start clearing stuff without him, for me that's a bullshit move, to put it lightly.
Yeah, I don't know how many people. Sorry, go.
I probably never able to do that to him.
What I would say is, for someone who's taught many groups and invested time in people, is don't worry about the fact of whether they do or they do not raid with you. Just look at it as what you've done is you've increased their experience, their ability, and their knowledge of the game. So to enable them to succeed in whatever they do. There's a lot of time where, there's a lot of people that put time into people so that their groups are, and myself included, I've put time into people and then they've gone off to other guilds, and you sit there and you feel deflated. But then just take a step back, reflect, and say, okay, I've now enabled them to go off and do the content that perhaps they would never have been able to do, or more importantly, you've sped up the process. So take pride in that achievement rather than look at it as a loss for you personally.
I mean, I always have looked at it as an achievement. There's plenty of people. Like I said, I've taken just brand new people to the game. I know one person. They were trying to DPS and they just didn't get it. They had some issues where they just couldn't do it. And I pulled this person aside and I was like, "You ever try healing?" She's got more clears than I do now, and and she left. So. I take a lot of pride in the fact that, hey, I put her on the path to go in that direction, but at the same time, I really liked running with her, and she was really good at what she did.
So how many people left?
I've been raid leading since early 2016, so I mean, there's some people I've like really attached to more than others, but there's so many, man. So many, and they come and go sometimes, and
that's really the thing. I used to lead a training guild that was like Craiglorns and Maw, getting people their first foot in raiding. And the hardest thing was, like you said, everyone who you give a foot up, you teach them how to do the content, and then they leave. But it's all kind of part of it. When you are a guild that's just trying to get people a foot in the door, once people have that foot in the door, most of the time they want to go somewhere with it. And if you can't offer that going somewhere with it, then they're going to find it somewhere else.
So
But
then
I will
maybe
say-
I need to focus, less on the training aspect and more on, are you capable of doing this content and do you want to do it with us?
Yeah, or
That's
you can keep training. Both are perfectly valid options. And I will say there is nothing more that feels better than running into someone that you gave a foot in the door who is now running with one of the top groups on the server. Because I've had that happen and it feels amazing.
That's one. That's one way you can do it. And like the title of this lecture was, it's raid leading, forming, leading, and maintaining. Maintaining is the hardest part for everybody. So,
right.
It's not only progressing the players; it's progressing your group. So, the maintaining is you're taught them rather than go and teach another group. Take that group into something a bit harder, and then a bit harder, and then a bit harder.
Now, just because somebody leaves doesn't mean they're gone forever if you have a healthy relationship too.
True.
If they want to go and do something with someone for 6 months, they might learn and bring something back to your group. So if someone leaves, if you keep social contact with them, they might join your group again or not be in your Discord, but there's still somebody who you can pull in and be like, hey, listen, I'm not comfortable in this role. You're better at this role than I am. I have someone that you could possibly help, or could you come in and show them how to do this? And a lot of people will feel flattered and come in and help and do stuff like that. But you got to make it a positive relationship. Like I've got raid leads that are completely capable of doing content, but yet can't clear the first boss in Sunspire with some groups. And everyone's pulling, 80k DPS, but you're still not clearing. Well, what's the problem?
If it makes you guys feel better, I feel like in my social and training guilds, some people just get burnt out. They don't realize how invested the game is, and they kind of just walk away. But some people will just use you, obviously. But I have a quick question for Nephis. I came in late, so I may have missed this.
Yeah.
So obviously the point of this is to help people out, but is it also because the endgame community isn't really that big and you guys are trying to expand it?
Yeah, that's one of the goals of the Discord.
Yeah, okay.
To introduce more people to raiding.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Because a lot of the players right now see raiding, or when they hear the word endgame, it's more negative images that pop in their head rather than positive. And it's usually, for the most part, 99% or 95% of the time more positive than it's negative. So this is just one way we can do that. And we have other plans in the works to hopefully further that along. Does anyone have any more questions before we end this? So don't mind the sucks if you signed up for the raid lead signups, because we haven't yet decided what dates or times yet. I'll keep you guys posted. I think most likely we'll start these raids potentially next week or 2 weeks from now. My life schedule is kind of fucked up until May 1st. So probably after May 1st we'll start, and we'll decide the days and times. Other than that, if anyone has any questions, let me know right now, and yeah, that's it.
I have a request.
Yes, what's your request?
What I would really like to do is, I've run all of the raids, and I'm sort of running at a sort of mid-semi endgame level, sort of AS +2, VCR +2, +3, but I'm always, it's always somebody else who's leading them, and I'd really like to be able to lead them myself. But I don't know what call-outs to give, what the important things are to ask people to focus on, and I'd really like a guide to really how to raid lead each different trial. What the important things are to say to the different roles that are in play. Is that something that you might be possible that it might be possible for you guys to provide?
In the future, I'll be putting out trial guides, but this Raidly program will also cover that as well.
I probably can't come onto the Raidly program because I'm in the UK, and at the moment
No, that's fine. It'll be
stupid o'clock.
It'll be streamed / uploaded to YouTube as well for future reference.
So
cool.
Again, like I said earlier, I sort of have plans to expand this to PCEU in the far future, and like I briefly mentioned
That'd
earlier.
be so nice.
Yeah, like I briefly mentioned earlier too. Outcast and I were just sort of like, like talking, and we're like, oh, maybe we should go to console and teach people. So that's expanding this to console, both Xbox and PS4, potentially once the new consoles come out, is a possibility as well on our part. But probably in the far future, like maybe like next year or something. I don't know, or this year, end of this year. I wouldn't hold my breath because.
Are you suggesting you might have an actual real life as well as doing this?
Yeah.
Dude, time to publish a book.
I think there's
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Well, you're gonna have to change it every patch.
Well, trials tend.
Invest in some whiteout.
College professors do.
Trials tend to not change too much. Yeah.
The whiteout would show up on his Twitch stream, though.
Well, every next version of the book, you just make more money. There you go.
All right, so
Yeah, that's how college professors do it.
Well, we'll say
exactly.
if you're looking to do AS+2, VCR +3, then perhaps watch some VODs and see what other raid leads are calling out for now. That potentially could be a good way.
That would be brilliant, but what I mostly see is streams of people doing it without a voiceover, like explaining exactly what's happening at the same time.
She's absolutely right.
Exactly,
It's very,
yeah.
very difficult to find a good trial guide when you're just looking on like YouTube, for instance. There aren't really any guides on like how to lead the raid or, we did this mechanic because it's just here
Yeah.
it is. Watch me get the 11-minute achievement and.
If anybody is like old enough to.
Off going to Twitch if you want to see how people actually do things.
That's true.
Finding good players and that stream and watching them.
When I'm watching, I'm an entirely healer main, so when I'm watching a healer main do things, I run VCR +3. I don't have the completion yet, but I do have completions in all the other trials, and I've done them enough that I can tell what's going on when I just watch things, even when there's music going. But what I really want to know is what it's like from a DD point of view, what it's like from a tank point of view, what sort of callouts are necessary for DDs and tanks. Because the healer stuff I know, but it's the voiceover that would really make the difference.
A lot of people stream with Discord in it. You just have to look to find people that do.
But
I
then
guess
you gotta find
I
them when
haven't
they're
found
doing
them.
Well, there's a list of streams we have. The hard mode stream team that often has tanks, DPS, and healers. You can check them out. But
Okay.
like I said earlier, I have plans to push out trial guides in this summer. And
That
other
would be
things.
amazing. That would be really,
So
really
that's
cool.
that's something I've always had in the back of my mind. But yeah, just to summarize, wrap up this lecture, as I don't want to keep you guys from dinner or whatever. We went over why do you want to raid lead. Doesn't really matter what background you come from, PvP or PvE or whatever. Hardest part about raid leading, consistency. Yeah, rosters, fills, performance, keeping the group together, maintaining a group together, decisions in content and for the team, whether that is deciding to replace somebody or bring somebody else in, or deciding what strategy to use. That's usually something. And hindsight is 2020. There's in the moment when you make decisions as a raid lead, there's sometimes like you can't tell if it's right or wrong, which is perfectly fine. Goals, endgame progression, or endgame progression. Goals will decide everything. So I didn't mention this earlier, but somebody told me that they recently decided to implement DPS requirements in their guild. What happened was 3 of their officers left the guild, and 1 person quit the guild. Why? Because it's perceived as elitism or whatever, or toxic. So you always want to be clear from the very start what you're gonna do. So no one's confused, no one's gonna feel betrayed or whatever. That's pretty much it. Community, sure, go to Guild Finder, go to Zone Chat on your respective platform or server, but again, Discord is really important. I cannot stress this enough. I cannot stress this enough. You gotta join random Discords if you want. Look around. Don't be afraid to reach out. Even in Discord, maybe ask people, hey, are you in the Discord? I can join. Well, it's really important. Discord, again, really revolutionized how the ESO community interacts with one another. You never had EU players talk to NA players. You never had PS4 players talk to Xbox players or Xbox players talk to PC players. Never. Until Discord. So keep that in mind. Requirements for your group, just to clarify, 60 to 70k DPS and rate dummies is fine for the most part. Whether it's gonna be if it's gonna be higher, that's gonna again depend on the goal. Healers and tanks, you want to make sure the gear is good, that they at least have the basics. Word of mouth is often gonna play into sometimes you choosing whether to take one person or not, but this can be dangerous as well. This can be a double-edged blade. Like, let's say you hear some bad shit about like, a person. How you decide whether you decide to take them into the team or not is up to you. I wouldn't let, like, you never know. There's always both sides to the story. So, double-edged sword. Personalities, we kind of went over that a lot, actually. Raid leading, best position to raid lead from healer tank. Usually, most raid leads often have to cover tank roles because tanks, good tanks at least, are really hard to find. You can raid lead as a DPS. We kind of clarified this. Really good players like Karma, RNC can raid lead from DPS positions and not have their performance too impacted. Although they will also sometimes say, yeah, it sometimes does affect performance. So no worries if you are a DPS raid lead. It can affect your performance. But again, this plays into comms and delegation. You can't always call out every little single thing. Keep that in mind. Too much comms is too bad. Too little is too bad as well sometimes, depending. And sometimes silence is perfectly okay. Rosters and compositions, we talked about this as well. Mixed can be a little difficult, but manageable. It really depends on the goals as well. If you don't care, if you just want to clear, compositions, min-max and compositions don't really matter too much. However, I do advise for a lot of groups in terms of easing the support role, gear, and stuff like that. Choose a mag or stam composition, but it's not law, it's whatever. Again, raid leading is not just about relations with yourself and other people in your team, it's also with other people in the community and also from other raid teams. You don't want to make a bad reputation for yourself and be like, you'll never be able to fail. This has happened quite a lot more than you can imagine. Raid leads that act like shit and they can't fail, much to their surprise for whatever reason. Perfection versus progress, we covered this as well. RNC made it a point to bring it up. Again, if you are a raid lead of an experienced group and you bring experienced groups together, it's okay if raid nights are shit. Just mark progress rather than the result. And we brought up YouTube videos. You look at YouTube videos, those are the results, not the process. If you look at streams of raid teams, like Time brought up, it's a lot more messy. It's a lot more dirty. So again, progress is more important than perfection. Interactions with our teams, we kind of went over this a lot as well. Don't be too strenuous or make ridiculous rules about, oh, you can't raid with that team. As long as they make it to your raids, whatever. Don't care about it. And ESO logs, I'll link the video after this lecture from the Asian Gun, and etiquette, frustrations, burnout, and we kind of summarize this. And yeah, I'll let you guys know what the best days or times are. We can kind of work it out. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for coming to the lecture. Does anyone have any more questions?
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
No problem. It's
great information.
It's a win-win for everyone.